Hello, everybody. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone. You are tuned into the Couch GMs podcast. I'm your host, George Kerth, and here along with the other two wise men, we got Tyler Snyder.
Ho, ho, ho.
And Cody Roadcap.
How's it going, everybody? I don't know if wise men after some of our bold predictions this season is the right term, but it is in the holiday spirit. As always, welcome to another episode. We're three best friends who love talking football. It's a big week this week. We're all going to watch football all day on Sunday together, and we're going to talk about the games, and we hope you enjoy the conversation.
Absolutely. If you're wondering what you can expect from this podcast, well, I will tell you. You can get some weekly breakdowns and predictions, some fantasy advice. It is a big fantasy week. It is the fantasy championship game, so make sure you listen to the whole podcast. You're going to want this advice, guys. You're going to get some bold predictions. Maybe we'll get this one right. I don't know. I'm feeling pretty merry, and we're just going to have some fun talking football.
And we want to spread the cheer with all of you on social media, and be sure to spread it to your friends as well. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the Couch GMs. So before we talk about this week, why don't we take a quick look back at last week, where we saw Cody and I tie in our weekly picks at 12-4. Tyler loses among the guys at 11-5. It's a solid record to lose at. But if you remember, Cody's girlfriend did challenge us 2 picks last week and only finished 10-6. Cody, I know we have a punishment coming for her. How's she feeling?
She's not too happy about it. She doesn't like that she saved Tyler, who we talk about all the time, has somehow either finished first or second pretty much all season. And she's also a little mad at me because when she was going through her picks, she actually wanted to pick Cincinnati, and I told her she was dumb to do so. And I guess she would have been right, but her official pick was Pittsburgh, so she's going to come out on the bottom, and we got a punishment for her coming up this week. Hopefully, we will see that on social media soon.
And just a quick look at the overall standings. Tyler does seem pretty safe with 2 weeks left at a 9-game lead. He has 131 wins. I'm at 122. Cody, 2 games back in last place at 120.
Yep, it's not looking great for me. I'm now in last place. I didn't get my bold prediction right last week, but Tyler did. You said that 6 different quarterbacks would score a rushing touchdown, and we almost had that before Sunday even started. I think the final count was like 10. I just know there was
10 or 11, something like that.
Can I just say that this, after our rough start to bold predictions this year, this now makes back-to-back weeks that I've got my bold prediction right.
Well, kudos to you. Hopefully you start losing some picks and maybe some bold predictions.
Well, hopefully not.
Share the joy. Share the joy. It's the season of giving. Help us out. Give us a win here or there.
That's up to the teams to decide. I've picked some really questionable picks in the past, and it has just somehow worked out for me. Maybe luck is just, on my side this year. But Cody, you and I do play each other in a fantasy championship in our biggest league. Maybe all that luck I've had it will run out, and maybe it's your time to shine. Maybe you'll get a fantasy championship rather than getting these picks right.
I doubt it. I'm a little hurting. Your team is pretty good. I lost Cam Akers, so that's like the 4th player in 4 weeks that I've now lost. Don't even understand. Sorry, George, how I'm in the championship game. But that's enough. Talking about our championship game, we talked about it at the beginning of the show. It is championship week for all leagues that are crucial, important. If you have a week 17 championship, you need to change that. But we're going to just talk about, we talked about it earlier in the show. If you're not starting a guy this week, drop him. The only reason you would keep him if it's going to prevent your opponent from picking up and playing against you. I know in our league, like I mentioned, I lost Cam Akers, dropped him. I dropped DJ Chark because he wasn't going to see the lineup, and try to get some running backs to fill in his spot later in this week. So any guys out there you want to drop, now is the time to do it.
Yeah, and if you know somebody, well, if you know the person that you're playing needs a certain position, like Cody just said, you can use those bench spots to prevent that. So if you look at your opponent's roster, see that they have a defense that they're not going to want to start, pick up all the good defenses. Why not play a little defense? It's not just about offense. Same thing with other positions. They need a running back. Le'Veon Bell's out there. Ahmed from the Dolphins, he is out there. Go ahead and stash him. Play some defense.
Myles Gaston is coming back for the Dolphins this week, though, so don't totally sit on Ahmed. But yeah, it's possible there.
You know what else is possible that we didn't think was going to happen? The Jets won a game.
Unreal.
Can you believe it?
Unreal.
Is this going to be the most we've talked about the Jets in like 5 weeks?
It probably the most we're going to talk about them all season, and we're not going to talk about them very long. They won. They beat the Rams. That helps the Packers, be able to clinch a first round bye this week if they can turn around and win again. Or the Rams can get back on track and win this week, but we'll get that later. The Jets somehow shocked the world, and it also is probably going to cost them Trevor Lawrence. So, Tyler, as a Titans fan, what is your thoughts on Trevor Lawrence now going to be in the AFC South?
I don't like it. It's bad enough that we have to face Deshaun Watson twice a year, but now having to face Trevor Lawrence twice a year as well. I mean, that's just painful. And you know what? Moving on to our next topic, there is also a rumor of another person coming to the AFC South. The Colts are linked to Carson Wentz being traded there because, guys, Carson wants out of Philly. So the AFC South might have uh, Carson Wentz, Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, and the best of all of them, Ryan Tannehill.
I want to talk a little bit about media here. So this was originally reported by Adam Schefter, a very reputable source, that Carson Wentz would probably want out of Philly if he is not the starter next year. He posted this not talking to Carson Wentz or his agent. I mean, it's not something that's that crazy, and I think it's probably true. But this is the kind of thing that really shows me that the media is against Carson Wentz as much as Philly's been against him and everything else. It's just causing more unneeded stress and everything else in his reputation, career, whatever. We go from Josina Anderson getting a leaked source that Carson Wentz isn't a good leader and we don't get along with him, which probably Alshon Jeffrey, but not the point. And now there's stuff like this coming out too for no reason. Like, I hate the media.
He's just not the hot ticket item, honestly. You can go all the way back to Alex Smith on the Chiefs, where Alex Smith was actually a pretty good quarterback for them, and he found some success. But as soon as they got the new hot ticket, Patrick Mahomes, they could care less about Alex Smith. So he leaves. They don't care what he does anywhere else. It isn't until he has to have a traumatic injury and come back from it that the media actually cares about him again. Now, Carson Wentz is yesterday's news. He's not the hot ticket item anymore. He was, but then Nick Foles overshined him, so they only care about Foles. And then Foles leaves. Let's talk about Jalen Hurts. He's the hot ticket item. We don't care about Wentz. He's not hot. He's not popular, so the media is not going to like him.
Yeah, unfortunately, that seems to be true. And fantasy wise, I think Jalen Hurts, after the last 2 weeks, you're probably going to play him this week in your fantasy playoffs just because of his running ability, and the offense seems to be firing on all cylinders with him there. But I just want to bring up that rumor you mentioned with him back to the Indianapolis Colts, reuniting with Frank Reich. If Carson Wentz ends up in Indianapolis, I would go out on a limb. I don't even know if it's out on a limb for us because we've been Carson Wentz stands, we want to stick with Carson Wentz. But that's probably the best spot for him. And Eagles fans are going to be begging for him to come back in 2 years if he ends up in the Indianapolis Colts.
Absolutely. I mean, with that defense that they have there and the up and coming stars at receiver that I really didn't think would be that good in Zach Pascal and Pittman, Carson Wentz can go there and find immediate success. I really think that he can make a deep playoff run and be a potential Super Bowl candidate within 1 year of being on the Colts if he went there with that team around him. The only reason the Colts aren't better than they are now is because they have sidearm throwing 87 kids Phillip Rivers.
And we all know that we're not fans of Phillip Rivers, but no matter where he goes, I do wish Carson Wentz success, and I do think that we're going to regret letting him leave Philadelphia. Just got to hope Jalen Hurts works out and ends up being maybe a poor man's Michael Vick or Lamar Jackson in the long run.
Hold up there, George. I wouldn't say wherever he goes, we wish him luck. If he goes to the Patriots, nope, not rooting for him anymore. I'm sorry.
Fair assessment. I would be skeptical there too, or anywhere else in the NFC East in my case.
Oh my gosh, if they let Dak Prescott walk and they got Carson Wentz, that would be the funniest thing ever. Eagles fans would be so
Yeah,
mad.
he would also do really well in Washington.
He would.
There's a good team around him there. So, but speaking of other people moving to new teams, the NFL changed their regulations. They've now allowed coaches to start interviewing virtually as early as this week. Just some names to keep an eye on. Marvin Lewis, after a year off, is getting an interview with the Texans. They're also looking at former coach, Jim Caldwell. Falcons have liked what they seen out of Raheem Morris, so he has a chance to stay the permanent head coach. And the Lions still don't know what they're doing, and I hope it stays that way.
Yeah, but the Lions have been linked to Robert Saleh because if you didn't hear, the government actually reached out to the Lions and said, please go after Robert Saleh from the 49ers. Michigan government reached out to them.
I think they're so tired of seeing their team struggle and waste the careers of some of these top-notch players that they're trying to help them, I guess.
Who knows? I don't. We don't want to get into a whole politics and sports thing. That could go down a very long road. So let's just get right into our weekly picks. As always, guys, we post these on our social media. Follow along. Hey, if you want to challenge us like my girlfriend did last week, feel free. If you don't want to do the punishment, but just want to post your picks, we'd love to see them. And, we're getting a gift this year. Christmas Day on Friday to complete having a game every day of the week. We have the Minnesota Vikings at the New Orleans Saints. The Saints, coming off that tough loss against Kansas City, are the favorites, and Minnesota needs a win to stay alive in the playoff race. What are your guys' thoughts on this matchup?
It's not going to happen. They're not going to stay alive. That's my take on this game. I got to go with New Orleans. I think with Drew Brees back, they become tremendously better. I don't care about what New Orleans stats are without Drew Brees at the quarterback. I don't care what their record is, so don't bring me those records. I think that they are better with Drew Brees, and I think that they're going to shine this week. I think it might be a pretty close game, and Dalvin Cook should find some success despite New Orleans being such a good run defense. But I have to go with the Saints to win this one.
I'm going to agree and go with the Saints here. The Vikings always have to be considered in games because of Dalvin Cook, but I think my favorite thing that sums up how the Vikings are up and down is I saw a story about Justin Jefferson this week and getting caught on hot mic cursing out Kirk Cousins for missing a pass, and everyone goes, now we can finally see how Stephon Diggs felt. It wasn't just him. And that just tells me that the Vikings are never going to have any kind of sustained success until they finally make a change at quarterback, and they're stuck in a contract that's not good.
Yeah, unfortunately, Kirk Cousins is up and down. Thankfully, this game for the Vikings fans out there, this game is at 4:30, so not quite prime time, so he still has a chance. And this is a rematch of last year's wild card game where a lot of Saints fans were crying for a pass interference. I mean, that never happens to them on Kyle Rudolph in the end zone at the end of that game. So I think there'll be a little extra rival or a little extra heat as the Saints can end their season as the Vikings did to them a year ago. And we get football on Friday. COVID this year, not a lot of travels for the holidays. It's nice to have something to look forward to, and your immediate family or a few friends can get together and just enjoy this holiday season together.
Yeah, and what better Christmas gift than having football 3 days in a row? Because not only do we have football on Friday, but we also have it on Saturday again. And the first game of those Saturday games would be Tampa Bay at the Detroit Lions. The Lions don't look good right now, guys. And at this point, with so many injuries on their team, they might as well just keep benching those stars, save them for next year. Do you give them any chance to beat Tampa Bay?
By the way, really quick, it's 4 days in a row because there is still a Monday game this week. I just wanted to get you more excited.
Oh my gosh, that's right. And a happy new year. This is great.
Anyway, I got to go with Tampa Bay. Like you said, the Lions are a mess, and Tampa Bay still got a lot to play for. They are on the edge, and they could clinch a playoff spot with a win. And there's still that slim chance that they can get the South, but the Saints pretty much have it locked up, and when they could have it locked up before this game even plays with just a win on Christmas. But was it the Lions that had all the coaching problems with COVID?
Yep, absolutely. They don't even know who can coach on Saturday. They might not even have a defensive staff. This game could get out of hand quickly. The Lions, they're also dealing with Matt Stafford. They're debating if they should shut him down. He still wants to play. With his rib injury, I don't know why they don't just turn it over to Chase Daniel. With no coaches, banged up Matt Stafford, no Kenny Galladay, I'm with Snyder on this one. I think Tampa Bay is going to run away with this one. Probably don't have a chance with the NFC South, like George mentioned. Playing on Christmas Day, the Saints should take care of that one. But Tampa Bay clinches a playoff spot, and play your Bucks in fantasy.
Absolutely, Cody. I got to agree with you there. So we're all picking Tampa Bay. We all picked New Orleans. So let's just go ahead and move on to another game that we are all picking the same, and that would be the San Francisco 49ers at the Arizona Cardinals. We are all picking the Cardinals in this one. Cardinals are 5-point favorites. We heard that Nick Mullins went down with an injury. The 49ers said that they probably won't bring Kittle back if they are eliminated from the playoffs. They were eliminated last week, so Kittle won't be back. I think the Cardinals are just the all around better team, and they could clinch a playoff spot with a win and a Chicago loss this week. So give me Arizona to pull that off.
I'm a little bit upset they signed Josh Rosen to the active roster, but you're probably not going to see him. I think I would like to see him with a more competent team around him, even though they're super hurt. And there's just not enough time for him to get inclinated into the offense and the playbook.
Yeah, wouldn't it be interesting though if Josh Rosen got to play against the Cardinals, just like that whole drama, since
And
they did
one.
draft him and then
Now, if we're talking about revenge games the last few weeks, that would be a revenge game I want to see.
That would be so
yeah,
amazing if you not only played against them but won too. That'd be huge.
I agree with that. And I just also want to talk about Arizona from a fantasy perspective real quick. Their defense, they're probably available. They're not a top defense that would be held all season. They're probably available. And San Francisco, the last 2 weeks, has given up the number one or played against the number one defense in fantasy, and now they're down there to their third string quarterback in CJ Beathard, so not looking great. Have a lot of turnovers. Arizona could win you your week from a defense perspective.
As a guy who has the Cardinals defense against you, I hope so.
Anywhere you can get those fantasy points in the fantasy championship, we'll take it. So why don't we move on to the last of the Saturday triple header, and that is the Miami Dolphins traveling out west to the Las Vegas Raiders. There were some question marks about Derek Carr playing in this game, but he was a full participant on Wednesday, so it's looking pretty
Ooh.
good. I was looking forward to seeing Marcus Mariota as well, but unfortunately, it looks like that's not going to happen. And this is a big game for playoff contention. The Raiders would need more help even if they win this game, but they need a win over Miami to even stay alive. And then they would need a win and a Miami loss next week as well to get in, I believe. So do you think that the Raiders can keep it alive here?
I don't think so. I think Miami's a better team. I was really, really hoping to see Mariota in this game. I mean, as a Titans fan, I rooted for him his whole career. And even though he wasn't the right guy and he really didn't live up to the expectations we had, he was such a good person, a good hearted person, that it was so hard not to like the guy. So I loved seeing him come out last week and have some success. He did have some errant throws, but I mean, coming off the bench, not expecting to play, it's kind of hard to be perfect. But I just felt like the Raiders haven't really looked good since their last loss to the Chiefs. I think they've been on a bit of a downswing, and I think Mariota coming out and playing actually gave them a bit of a resurgence. The team kind of rallied around him and got excited. So I was really thinking that if Mariota played, I'd actually pick them to beat Miami. But with Derek Carr starting, I feel like they go right back to their old ways, and I'm going to pick Miami to win.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick Miami to win as well. I do think we've seen the Raiders all season, come out and surprise us some weeks. So if the Raiders come out and ball out and walk away with a victory, it wouldn't be a huge shock. I too was looking for Mariota to play, the battle of the Hawaiian quarterbacks. Doesn't look like we're gonna get it. And, Mariota also made Josh Jacobs a better player because of the read options and counting for his legs. Miami's defense is pretty good. I mean, in the fantasy playoffs, there's not enough running backs to bench Josh Jacobs, but he's a guy that I'm not expecting a lot out of this week.
Quick before we go, Titans fan, school us on how to say his name one more time.
Oh, for the last time, it is not Mariota. It is not Marcus Mariota. It is Mariota. It's not Mariota. It is not Mariota. It is Mariota.
Mariotto, as the commissioner says, will not probably not be playing in this game, and we're all
Are you
picking
too?
Miami. So let's move on to Sunday. We got the Atlanta Falcons traveling to the Kansas City Chiefs, and this is one of the bigger spreads of the weekend. And Kansas City has a chance to clinch the number one seed and the only bye in the AFC with a win. I don't think any of us are going to say they're going to lose. So let's see. What do you guys think about this one?
I'm not going to talk about the game too much because I agree. I think Kansas City will go out there and play well. I do want to point out that the Atlanta Falcons defense you normally think of them as putting up a lot of points, and that's because their pass defense is really bad. I know Clyde Edwards-Helaire getting hurt last week. Le'Veon Bell was one of the top waiver wire pickups, if not the only waiver wire pickup this week. And he might not be an automatic start this week because the Falcons are actually ranked eighth against running backs. So this might be the game that like Patrick Mahomes takes back the MVP race. And I do want to point out, a couple weeks ago, I told you guys all right before the fantasy playoffs, drop Todd Gurley and let him implode on someone else's bench. And Raheem Morris came out and said Ito Smith is now the feature back because of his knee. Hopefully you guys listened and didn't keep him and play him in your first round because it probably didn't end well for you.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bold take. I mean, I said that I probably would have stashed him. I do have Todd Gurley in a few leagues, and I did keep him on the bench thanks to your advice, so I appreciate that. Um, but would you go out and get Ito Smith now that Gurley is not going to be the feature back?
I think there's definitely a lot of guys I would rather play over Ito Smith, but whenever you hear feature back next to someone's name, you have to at least consider them in fantasy. And Ito Smith is not some no-name guy. Well, he's not really a great guy, but he's gotten a lot of carries in the past. He has a little bit of a track record. So it's not like going out there and starting some undrafted rookie free agent like we've been doing with the Miami Dolphins every week. I think he has to have some consideration, but there's a lot of guys I would still play over him.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things we talked about earlier. If your opponent happened to lose Cam Akers and didn't make a move, go grab Ito Smith or a guy off the waivers to like block his move. But I wouldn't put him in my lineup if unless I absolutely have to. Like you had Cam Akers, you still had Christian McCaffrey somehow, and maybe you lost Clyde Edwards-Helaire too. If you're going to start 3 random running backs this week, you might have to play him. But he is more of a block candidate than a start candidate for me.
Speaking of running backs, let's go ahead and move on to our next game, which features two possibly startable running backs on the same team in the Cleveland Browns with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. They are facing the New York Jets. The Jets came out and played some defense last week. With that being said, I mean, we're not going to talk too much about the game itself. We're all picking Cleveland. Yes, the Jets won a game. They still suck. So don't get blinded by that. But with the Jets playing some defense last week, seem to be playing with some fire. Do you guys feel comfortable starting Kareem Hunt? Now, Nick Chubb's a must start every week, in my opinion. But do you guys feel comfortable starting Kareem Hunt in fantasy?
Typically, I feel like Kareem Hunt has done better in close games because he's been used more as a pass catching back, even though he is a great running back, straight running back as well. But in this case, with the Browns, if they get up big, they're in a playoff hunt, they think they're going to win, you're probably going to see them using Hunt as more of a rushing piece as well as the receiving back because they don't want to risk Chubb to 25 carries. You could see more of an even split. So I would be confident thinking that Cleveland is going to win this game pretty handedly and be running the ball a lot. You could see 15 carries for each of them, even 30 times rushing the ball against the Jets would not shock me.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of running. One thing we didn't mention yet was Quinnen Williams had a big game against the Rams last week, shutting down that run for the first couple quarters, and then he left with an injury and has now been placed on IR. Kareem Hunt is a tough one, though. He hasn't had, I think the last 3 weeks, he's been worse than a top 20 running back for fantasy, so I understand the hesitation to want to play him. But I do think George has a point to wanting to run the ball, win the game, keep Nick Chubb fresh, split carries. He'd probably be a low RB2 flex for me, depending on the running backs you have, but they are very scarce this time of season, so you might actually have to no matter what.
All right, guys. Well, I appreciate the insight. So Cleveland actually still has a shot to win the AFC North, and that is heavily due to Cincinnati beating Pittsburgh on Monday Night Football. It was one of the biggest upsets we've seen all season. And guys, I know we were hyped to watch it because we have been against Pittsburgh all year. So let's go ahead and move on to their game. It's going to be a tough one. They are facing the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts are still fighting for the AFC South, and Pittsburgh is fighting to hold on to the AFC North. So who do you guys have in this game?
Well, I didn't think Pittsburgh was going to lose to Cincinnati, and I do think Pittsburgh's still a decent team. They're not as good as everyone was hyping them up to when they were the last remaining undefeated team. I do know Tomlin has now talked to Juju, and Juju said he's going to stop dancing on the team's logos because we saw how personal Von Bell took that on Monday. And Roethlisberger came out on Wednesday and said that they held a players-only meeting, and players-only meetings seem to go in the right direction for good teams. I imagine Pittsburgh bounces back, beats the Indianapolis Colts. I know it's gonna be a close game. It's gonna be a tough game, but I think they pull out a victory after their short skid and start to get back on track here for the playoffs.
This might just be me talking, with hope, because I hope that Indy loses, with the Titans having a tough game this week, hoping that the Titans still win the AFC South. I'm hoping Pittsburgh wins, but at the same time, I honestly do agree with you, Cody. I think that Pittsburgh, they are still a decent team. I don't think they're great, but I think they're still good, and I think they're going to come out angry after losing three straight. They're going to want to prove everybody wrong that has been saying that they completely fell apart, they lost it, they don't have it anymore. I think they're going to come out with some fire, and I really think we're going to see some things out of Pittsburgh that we haven't seen in a while. And for that reason, I'm actually going to give Pittsburgh the edge in this game. I expect it to be a 3-point or less game. I think it's going to be close down to the wire, but I am going to go with Pittsburgh to upset Indy.
Now we know I am locked in on this game because I picked the rest of the Steelers' schedule a couple weeks ago when I said they were going to drop 3 at the end of the season. 2 of the 3 they lost so far were not 2 that I was expecting. This is one I was expecting them to lose, so I'm going Indy, and I still do believe, even though I'm locked in, that Indy is going to win this game. I'm sorry, Tyler. I'm sorry, Titans fans. Pittsburgh is on the skid. I understand. I get exactly what you guys are talking about with the players only meetings normally do turn things around. Maybe it's me being a fan of Philly teams where I've seen plenty of times where it hasn't happened. So that doesn't completely convince me that they're going to turn it around. The Colts have so much to play for, including clinching a playoff berth with a win and a couple of other teams losing. And if the Titans happen to not pull it off in a big game that we'll talk about later in Green Bay, they could even take over the division again. They could pass Pittsburgh in the standings and knock Pittsburgh down to the 3 or 4 seed. There's a whole lot that can happen. And I think because of that, Indy's not going to lose their focus. And even if Pittsburgh comes out more strong, I'm going to have my faith in Indy this week.
Yeah, like we said, it's gonna be a close game, and it wouldn't be surprised to me if we see this game in a couple weeks in the first round of the playoffs. These two teams back together. But let's stay in the AFC South with a team that's just now got the number one pick. All they have to do is keep losing, and they get the Chicago Bears this week, who need a victory to stay alive in the playoff hunt. And I think the Jacksonville Jaguars want Trevor Lawrence. Their owner, I think it was, or someone in the city came out and said, like, thank you for to the Jets for like changing our franchise. And man, they haven't even drafted the guy yet. So I think Chicago comes out. They're going to play very well. There's not too much to say about Jacksonville besides James Robinson. He had a pretty bad ankle injury. They're hoping to get him back this week, but Chicago's defense is pretty good. I don't know if you're going to risk that in your fantasy playoffs. Limited snaps with James Robinson. I'll let you guys talk about that if you want to, but give me Chicago all day on this one.
Speaking of James Robinson, he, in my opinion, is one of the biggest Pro Bowl snubs this year. We don't really talk about the Pro Bowl a lot on here, mainly because it's just a popularity contest. But even so, guys, James Robinson was an undrafted free agent on a bad team, and he's among the league leaders in rushing this year. He has put on an absolute performance, come out of nowhere. Nobody even knew his name coming in this year, and he is just dazzled. He is one of the biggest Pro Bowl snubs I think I've ever seen. And that's not going to change my opinion about this team or this game. I'm going to stick with Chicago, whether Robinson plays or not. Uh, Chicago needs the win to stay alive. Jaguars are going to play for Trevor Lawrence. I just had to say my piece there about James Robinson.
Kind of low key, the Bears have been one of the best offenses in the league since Mitch Trubisky came back to start. And we were yelling for that earlier in the year, and all of a sudden it happened. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with how good David Montgomery's been. And I don't see that changing against a weak Jacksonville defense. So definitely Chicago, but something to keep an eye on. If that offense keeps it rolling and it's not just not being able to stop the running game, they could have a chance to make some noise if they sneak into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think Chicago is a decent team. The way Montgomery is playing, Matt Nagy finally learned how to run the ball. I think we saw numerous times that David Montgomery would have less than 10 carries, and they'd be like, "Feed Montgomery. He's good when he has his opportunities." Mitch Trubisky hasn't been playing terrible. I don't once the playoff starts, who knows what you'll get from Mitch. But I just want to go back to Tyler's point on James Robinson. He's number 3 in rushing behind Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook, who are like neck and neck for Offensive Player of the Year. And he didn't get it over Josh Jacobs, who has been one of the most inconsistent running backs in the NFL. So, like you said, not fantasy, Pro Bowl is very much a popularity contest. Normally, you make it the year after the year you're supposed to, but that one was tough to see.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, I just don't understand how a guy can put his heart on the line for a team that doesn't even seem they want to win, and not make the Pro Bowl. I wish the Pro Bowl voting would go a little bit differently, because you put it up to the fans to vote. As much as it is fun for us to have a chance to vote our favorite players in, it is really just a popularity contest, and unless you are a fan of a bigger market team or a player on a bigger market team, your odds of making it are so much slimmer unless you do some crazy things. Like, the Titans are a small market team, and Derrick Henry had the third most votes out of any player in the Pro Bowl this year. But that's mainly just because he's a god among men. I just wish we could find some way to change the Pro Bowl voting up a little bit so more deserving guys can make it.
Well, it is good to point out that the fans do get a say, but it still comes from the NFL. If you look back to last season, Preston Smith led the whole NFC in linebacker votes. He was the number 1 guy from a fan voting and didn't even make the Pro Bowl, not even as an alternate, because of the fan only counting for a percentage of it. So, as much as we want to say it's a popularity contest between the fans, the NFL still has a lot of say, and they need to change what they're looking at.
And it's not all big market teams as well. I just want to mention, as an Eagles fan, there's no Cowboys that made the Pro Bowl this year. So,
Well, the Cowboys aren't a big market team this year. Cowboys fans are basically checked out.
You're right. The bandwagon's completely empty.
As soon as Prescott went down, they jumped ship.
I agree. And one other guy that made the Pro Bowl that some people are up in arms about that didn't really deserve it was Evan Ingram. We'll save that debate for another day. But the New York Giants are going to the Baltimore Ravens this week. This is another big spread. The Giants need a win and to not be eliminated from the playoffs. Baltimore still has their eyes. I think they can they still win the AFC North? I think there's an
No,
outside shot.
No.
there's not,
They
because
have
they
one
lost
extra
2
loss.
to Pittsburgh.
Gotcha. So they can't overtake Pittsburgh. I didn't know if it was a 3-way tie, what their division record was compared to all of them. But anyways, they still have their sights on the playoffs, bigger and better pictures. We still don't know about Daniel Jones. I think Baltimore continues to roll. Lamar Jackson continues to roll, and they get another victory.
I'm with you, Cody. I think Baltimore continues their winning streak. I think I saw them winning out besides that Cleveland game, and then they won that Cleveland game, and it seemed to turn them all around, and I think they could end up being a contender going in as a wild card this year. So give them to me here. Giants will probably be eliminated this week, and the NFC least will finally start to come into place. So we'll see what happens.
I'm really hoping that Baltimore loses. I mean, just to clarify, I did pick Baltimore to win. That is my pick for this week. But I'm hoping that Baltimore loses. Honestly, I mean, one, because there's a chance if Baltimore doesn't make the playoffs, that means both number 1 seeds from last year's playoffs wouldn't be in the playoffs at all. And that is some 2020 stuff right there. That is absolutely crazy. But I think Baltimore is just more of a pretender than a contender. I think that they are too one-dimensional around Lamar Jackson. I spoke about it last week that I think Baltimore is finally starting to find what made them so successful last year by letting Lamar run. But if you can shut down Lamar's running, what else do they really have? J.K. Dobbins has shown flashes, but that team will not commit to one set running back. They use them all. And their passing game is just subpar. And their defense, I mean, usually, some games Baltimore's defense has been great, but other games they just completely don't show up. They are inconsistent. I think that Baltimore's too one-dimensional. I think they're a pretender, and I would honestly not mind seeing them miss the playoffs.
Now, I don't want to read too much into it because it was against Jacksonville, but I did see the Ravens throwing the ball a lot more last week, and they actually had Lamar throw for 240 and 3 touchdowns. And that's not a normal Lamar game. So maybe they're starting to try to get out of the one-dimensional.
But like you just said it, like they threw it a lot, and he had 240. I mean, one,
Well,
it is against the
he had
Jags.
22 pass attempts. That's not a lot, but a lot for him is what I'm saying when they're up.
It's just it is against the Jaguars, and at the same time, I just feel like in the playoffs, there's gonna be games where you find a team that shuts down his running ability, shuts down the run offense as a whole, like the Titans did last year. And then what? If you're relying on just Lamar having to throw the ball, Mahomes can get it done, Aaron Rodgers can get it done. Lamar can't get it done.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see play out as the rest of the season unfolds. And you can't lie. Some of the whole Baltimore hate is because I would say a good 50 to 90% of your one side of your family are all Ravens fans, and you just cheer for them to lose any week.
I mean, that helps. I'm not gonna lie. I do cheer against the Ravens and the Steelers because my family is split between fans of those teams. Sadly, but no, honestly, just as an outsider, as a person who's unbiased, not even thinking about my team or my family, I really just don't think Baltimore is, that great. I think they're kind of fake, and I would like to see them exposed, and I'd like to see a team like, Miami, who we haven't seen in the playoffs in years, who have kind of an exciting team and a really good defense. I'd like to see a team like that make them instead.
I almost feel like Tyler and I have switched roles over the last year. I was always the guy that seemed to have an issue with rushing quarterbacks, and I'm trying to open up my mind to that's how the NFL is going, and there's still ways for those guys to hang in games. And I was a critic of Lamar Jackson when he first came in the league, and I definitely still see his flaws. But like Tim Tebow, I was never a fan of. I was always skeptical of Michael Vick, even though he was the Eagles quarterback. And now I feel like Tyler's starting to get into a situation where he's not trusting a lot of these mobile quarterbacks that don't have an electric arm because he doesn't think they can come out of situations.
Well, I mean, I never trusted Tim Tebow. I did trust Michael Vick. Uh, as far as mobile quarterbacks with an arm, I would need to hear who you're kind of referring to. Like somebody like Kyler Murray doesn't have an elite arm, but he's a really good runner and he can throw. And I trust Kyler Murray completely. I really like him. I think you can rely on him in big situations if you have to. Uh, Lamar is really the only one that I can see as the runner with a subpar arm that I don't trust.
Yeah, I've been a big fan of Lamar since day one. So I still think you can trust him. I think he can still uh, prove people wrong in the playoffs if he needs to throw the ball. Now, if he needs to make, 14, 17-point comeback, maybe that's asking a little bit too much, but there's truly not too many quarterbacks in the league that you'd trust with that kind of deficit in a playoff game against a good team. And George, I think you're just coming around to Lamar because you're dating a Ravens fan. Come on, you got to let people know about your personal life that influences your comments.
Man, Cody is just throwing our personal business to the wind today, talking about my family and George's girlfriend. Um, so, you know what? I think that's enough Ravens talk for one day. I think we've talked enough about them. So let's go ahead and move on to the next game. We got the Cincinnati Bengals at the Houston Texans. I'm picking Houston. I think Cincy, had their once and done against Pittsburgh. We said it earlier in the year numerous times that anytime you have a divisional matchup, there's always that chance of, you know, the unexpected upset because there's just something about divisional games. The teams know each other a lot better than any other team. So that's not the case this week. I think Houston is going to pull off this win, even though Houston's really not that great either. But if you have Deshaun Watson versus Ryan Finley, give me Watson all day, every day.
Guys, what
What
the heck?
What?
You you peer pressured me into picking Cincinnati against Pittsburgh earlier in the season, and you didn't do it this week when they actually won.
Yep.
George, we told you not to fall for peer pressure, so if you were listening, you wouldn't have done it anyways.
Fair statement. Congratulations to Cincinnati on winning their Super Bowl. But it was against a top rival on Monday night. I think that a lot of that was adrenaline. I'm going with Houston.
Yeah, I'm going with Houston too. You know, Houston doesn't have much of it. Like they got receivers starting named Chad Hansen. Man, I didn't even hear of Chad Hansen before 2 weeks ago,
Who?
and he was putting up yards. I think he'll continue to put up yards. Hey, maybe stream him in your flex this week because Cincinnati isn't the best defense. And like we all mentioned, they played their biggest game of the year. I don't think they can have a repeat performance. They'll probably dip lower than they've been. Wouldn't It's not my game to make a bold prediction, but if Cincinnati scores less than 7 points, I wouldn't be surprised, even though Houston defense is pretty bad.
It's not your game to make a bold prediction, but I'll go ahead and make a bold prediction then if you want me to. That's fine. You said Cincinnati could dip lower than they were. I agree with that. I'm going to say not only Houston, but I think Houston by 21 or more.
I could see it. I mean, Deshaun Watson, he's an electric quarterback. He has that potential to put up big points if he can get it connecting, especially against a weaker team like Cincinnati.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's pretty bold because we thought the Jets were going to lose by like 20 points to the Rams last week, and then they somehow won. So 21 is definitely a huge number. But I tend to agree with you, which is weird. I never agree with George this time of year.
What?
Man, the Christmas spirit is doing something weird in 2020.
Been dipping a little too much into that eggnog, the adult
Oh,
eggnog.
now you're putting my personal life on blast. I see how it is.
I also just find it really funny that we are talking about a team that is starting players that we've never heard of, and their team slogan is "Who Dey."
Yeah. Did you guys see their locker room chant after, where they like did the full "Who Day" thing, and it finally made sense to me because I've never understood it. And it's like "Who Day" that think they can beat the Bengals. I'm totally botching it, but like they did the whole chant, and I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense. I get why they get hyped for it. But as an outsider, a non-Cincinnati fan, never been a fan of that one.
No, it just sounds stupid. I mean, you hear "Who Dey," and then you're just like, really? Your chant is like, "Oh, who's this team? Wow, they won a game." Like that's a terrible chant. I don't know. I think they need to change it.
I mean, I don't know when it originated. It was probably a long time ago, but I feel like I always thought it was some kind of break off of the Saints Who Dat after Hurricane Katrina is when I heard that one break out. So I don't know.
Yeah, which one
I
came
mean, either
first? Stats department. Stats department that is listening to this podcast. If you could just find out who came up with their slogan first, was it "Who Dey" or "Who Dat"? Which one came first? Thank you in advance to our stats department listening to the podcast.
yes, I appreciate that one. And before we move on from this game, Gio Bernard had a pretty good game against the number one rush defense in Pittsburgh. Running backs are scarce. We lost Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Cam Akers, like we've mentioned. Are you chasing his fantasy points against this bad Houston Texans, or absolutely not?
You know, he's just a hard guy to rely on. I think he's one of those guys that it's like it really depends who you have. If you have obviously like an Austin Eckler or um, man, it's even hard to pull a name out of my head right now. But if you have certain running backs that you've been riding that have been consistent, start them. But if you are projected to lose by a lot, you need that potential for a random guy to go off. He might be a decent running back to slide in there just, out of hope, or if you're just trying to fill in for injuries, which brings me to my next point. If you are out there listening and you have running backs on your roster that you're unsure of, you're not sure if you should play Gio or somebody else, please, please, please reach out to us. We'll put our heads together. We'll give you your best answer, and we're going to try to win you a fantasy championship or a third place game or a consolation game. Whatever it is, we are here to help. So please let us know what your fantasy advice you need is.
And guys, I just got word from our stats department. Who Day originated in 1981, and Who Dat originated in 1983. So the Bengals actually had it first.
Wow, those sneaky
Well, I
Saints.
stand corrected. Yeah.
Well, then who dat needs to change?
At least that one kind of makes sense. Like, but anyways, that's enough talk about the Bengals and the Texans. That was a lot more time than we probably should have spent on that game. But let's move on to the 4 o'clock games with the Denver Broncos at the Los Angeles Chargers. Two young quarterbacks, balling out. Drew Lock has looked good the last couple weeks. Justin Herbert seems to be a lock for Offensive Rookie of the Year. What are your guys' thoughts on this game?
Ooh, bold saying lock for offensive rookie of the year. We just mentioned James Robinson, so that's pretty bold. But you
We
know,
know it's a quarterback.
I mean, everything's a quarterback award if we're being honest. It just seems that way. Anyway, I will move on to say that the Los Angeles Chargers are going to win this game. I think that they're the better team. Don't really have any faith in the Broncos. However, George, I'm going to ask you this question. It's some lineup advice against Cody in the fantasy championship, so I'm relying on you.
Oh, I'm in.
Kenyon Drake, he has had some up and down games in the last few weeks. and Melvin Gordon was completely disappeared and then has emerged these last couple weeks. On my team, would you start Melvin Gordon or Kenyon Drake for the fantasy championship? Which one do you rely on more?
Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon. Even though you're playing me, so take that advice at what you want, but Melvin Gordon.
I
It makes
mean,
me a
you're
little
looking
nervous.
at a tough matchup for Kenyon Drake, and you're looking at probably a much easier matchup for Melvin Gordon. And what I was going to say, actually, before you even asked me the question, a lot of people are probably going to be watching Rams Seahawks in this window, and this could be a game that you put up a lot of points. It could be very entertaining, but no one's going to care because it's between two teams that are eliminated from the playoffs. I think that makes me think Melvin Gordon would be, I would lean Melvin Gordon in that situation.
I do agree that this is the easier defense to face off against. My only fear is we're talking about the Chargers being, this great team. Justin Herbert's awesome. Austin Eckler, woohoo. They have a better roster. Um, is there any fear that the Chargers go up big enough early and the Broncos have to basically abandon the run? Or do you think Melvin Gordon is utilized all game?
I think Melvin Gordon could be utilized most of the game. I don't see the Chargers breaking out to a big lead, actually, because I think Denver's wide receiver core has kind of come together. And even though I'm saying like, oh yeah, they're going to pass the ball and be successful there, that's going to keep them in the game the entire game. I don't see it being a blowout at any point.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
I appreciate the advice, guys. So I picked the Chargers. Are you both picking the Chargers as well?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm picking the Chargers, and I do think the Chargers are probably gonna get out into a big league. I like their secondary. I think Drew Lock does have a little bit of a problem with interceptions. I'm not gonna lie, I was being facetious with about when I said Melvin Gordon. Totally expect you to play Kenyon Drake. Hey, but if you want to play Melvin Gordon, it's fantasy. We don't really know. You just set your lineup and pray essentially. So besides that, I think the Chargers win big. Hey, they finally won a close game last week, so I think the streak continues and the Chargers win 2 games in a row and possibly saving Anthony Lynn's job.
Okay, well, talking about head coaching jobs, how about this interesting matchup we have for our next game, which is Ron Rivera against his former team in the Carolina Panthers? Washington is 2.5 point favorites, but how about this little revenge game here? We were talking about revenge games. This is a good one.
When you said talking about head coaches, I thought you were going to ask about the decision Rivera has to make, after Haskins got caught maskless at a strip club after their loss.
What an
And
idiot. You finally get a chance to play again after he was benched earlier in the year, and he just goes and blows it. I just, some people, I don't know who is worse, Dwayne Haskins for finally getting a chance and blowing it, or Josh Gordon finally making it back into the league and then immediately relapsing. You can't trust either of these guys.
yeah, at least Haskins did appear that he is in line to be the starter if Alex Smith can't go. The team fined him $40,000 and took his captain letter away because he was voted captain at the beginning of the season, which has been weird since he was put on third string duties a couple weeks in. But he is no longer a captain, did have to pay a fine. But if Smith doesn't play because of the calf injury, he does look to be the starter.
I mean, I was talking with our good friend Marcus from the First and 10 Club, and he is, of course, as you know, if you listened earlier in the year, a Washington football team fan. And he was drawing comparisons talking to me to Ryan Leaf, and we all know that one turned out awful. And I think Washington has lost all faith in Haskins at this point, having seen him struggle for the most part and then being like, oh, maybe he didn't deserve to be benched, but then he comes back and pulls this. You're putting the entire league really at risk right before the playoffs by going out there and doing that without a mask in peak COVID season. And this really positive tests in the NFL have gone down. And now all of a sudden you're pulling this and you're supposed to be a role model and a leader for your team. That's just awful.
Which is why he lost his
Yeah,
captainship. He's not being a leader for his team.
Definitely, but I don't understand how they made a exception for him to come back to practice. I feel like he should have had to do the 5-day quarantine period. I know it's going to be a struggle if Washington had to run their offense and practice under Taylor Heineke, but I don't see how you can basically brush it off like that, even though they fined him. Whatever, who cares?
well, I think it's the same thing. We saw Deshaun Watson get fined a couple weeks ago for for the restaurant opening, but he was still allowed to practice. We saw the Raiders. They had an event that they were maskless and they were still able to practice. I think it all comes down to testing. So as long as he doesn't test positive or have an inconclusive test, he'll be allowed to practice. That just seems to be how the NFL protocols are. And besides all the Haskins drama, I am going to still pick the Washington football team in this matchup. Unfortunately, I don't think McCaffrey will be back. He was my ace in the hole I was hoping for against Tyler this week in our fantasy matchups, but I don't think I'll get him back this week. So I don't think Carolina will have a very, very successful day. Washington's defense is legit. Keep them in the game, and Washington pulls out a close one, in my opinion.
I'm going to agree and go with Washington. The only thing that would concern me is if Alex Smith isn't back. I think Haskins is a bit of a liability, but Washington's defense can hold down Carolina. Carolina's offense has not been as good in the last few weeks as it was earlier in the season, and without McCaffrey. So give me Washington, but I'm a little more skeptical if you don't see Alex Smith.
I'm actually going to go against you guys. Finally, I feel like we've all been picking the same games, but I'm going to pick Carolina in this matchup. I just feel like with all the drama surrounding the team, wow, I just said the team and didn't even mean it. That's actually what their football team name is. Um, all the drama surrounding the football team, I just feel like they're going to play poorly. We watched the Eagles when we think it's Alshon Jeffrey made his comments about Carson Wentz. They just seem to fall apart after that. Once there is some drama in that locker room and people start losing trust or start having anger towards other players on their team, it just seems to fall apart. So I think that that's going to happen this week. Carolina has still been close in most games. They still have a sneaky good offense when they need to. I will say that if Alex Smith does start, I'm going to wish I picked Washington to win, but I don't think he will. I think it is going to be Haskins at this point. So I'm going to go with Carolina to pull off this upset.
You made some great points. I think after last week, they've now had 9 one-possession losses, or one-possession games. Not all of them were losses, but that's how close they've played all season. Carolina's going to be a good team in the years to come. So you mentioned Philly. That's our next matchup. The Eagles-Cowboys, one that NFC East fans get up for. The Eagles won their last matchup 22-9 when they faced Ben DiNucci. At this time, the Eagles have a new quarterback in Jalen Hurts. Dalton's back. Zeke's still up in the air. Pollard looked good last week. The loser of this game is eliminated from playoffs. It's a big matchup. And George, I don't know why, but I'm going to go with your team. I'm going to
Ooh.
go with Philadelphia. I thought you might be the only one to pick this one. This one I was pretty much a coin flip. I can see it going either way. But just give me Philadelphia in a close one. Jalen Hurts continues to play well, and Dallas just doesn't quite have enough on defense.
Well, let me also just say, it doesn't matter what the stakes are, playoffs, doesn't matter. These teams could both be 2-win teams, and it's still a big week when it's Cowboys week. Let me just say that. But got to go with Philly. I was impressed with them hanging in with Arizona last week. I know I said that they were going to win, but they still impressed me with being able to hang in there. This offense has done a complete 360 under Jalen Hurts, and I think a lot of it is adding in the new dimension of him being able to run the ball a lot more effectively than Carson Wentz did. And for whatever reason, the receivers seem to be playing better. We're seeing the resurgence of Greg Ward, the legend. And even though we've seen a disappearance from Travis Fulgham, for whatever reason, Alshon Jeffrey looks like he can run routes again. So I don't know where that came from, but be it as you may, he has been helping the offense, and I think that gives me hope that Philly can win this game this week.
I'm going to go against you once again. I do like what I'm seeing out of the Eagles with Jalen Hurts, as much as I hate to say it. I just feel like his running ability is adding more to that offense. It's another leg to stop, and I feel like his arm is actually decent enough to still win if they fall behind. However, Dallas has been pretty good lately. I mean, even without Zeke last week, they have put up 71 points in their last 2 games combined, and I feel like with the Eagles' injuries in the defensive side, I just feel like Dallas is going to be putting up big points. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to hang in there with their issues on offense as well. I'm gonna go with Dallas in this game. I think it's gonna be close. I definitely see that 2.5 point spread. I would avoid it. I think it's gonna be very close. So I'm gonna go with Dallas, but I don't like it.
Yeah, this game could easily come down to which kicker do you like more, Jake Elliott or Greg Zuerlein? And this season, that's a tough question to answer. So I know George will be hyped for that one. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, right now we're planning to all watch the football games together because the Packers and the Titans play, and Dallas Cowboys and Eagles are a good game. I know George will be stressed, even though his team isn't going to do anything in the playoffs, but he still wants to make the playoffs. But let's move on to a better matchup in terms of playoffs, better division. We got the Los Angeles Rams at the Seattle Seahawks. The Rams won the last matchup 23-16. Unfortunately, they did lose Akers last week, along with losing to the Jets. I think they're going to rebound, but I don't know if it'll be enough. I don't see them sweeping Seattle, even though they're somehow really good against Seattle even before like Jared Goff. Like that used to be the team that gave the Seahawks the most trouble. I think Seattle gets a win here, and maybe this is just me hoping I'm like jinxing it in reverse because I actually need them to lose for the Packers playoffs.
I'm gonna agree and go with Seattle. I don't think a lot of times you see season sweeps in that division just because that division's so competitive. So the Rams won the first game, like you said. I think Seattle's got this game, and I'm a little bit concerned about the Rams without Akers. That's gonna affect their running game a little bit. And Seattle's due for a rebound. While I don't think that their offense is going to have an absolutely amazing day, their defense could hold it down a little bit more, kind of like we didn't expect it the last game and it happened. They only held the Rams to 23. I think if they hold the Rams to 23 again, they could win this game. So give me Seattle.
I'm gonna have to make it a three-peat. I'm gonna go against you guys again, and I'm gonna pick LA. Now I know it's weird picking LA after seeing them lose to the Jets last week. Um, but if we're being honest, the Seahawks really haven't looked that great either. They've been a big disappointment. I think that it was just a 1 week fluke. LA is gonna get it together. Sean McVay is way too smart to let something like that continue to roll over onto this week. And speaking about McVay being smart, since he's taken over as head coach, the Los Angeles Rams have actually won 5 of their last 6 games against the Seahawks. They just seem to have the Seahawks number. For that reason, I'm going to have to go with LA in this matchup. I think they're the better team. I think they're going to keep that rolling. And yeah, this is going to be a tough game, though, guys. I think this is going to be a very good one to watch. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's gonna be a good one to watch. Unfortunately, we'll be watching the Cowboys and the Eagles. So hopefully, you guys are able to watch this game instead. Maybe send us updates on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. Let us know how this game's going, what you're enjoying about it, because our eyes will most likely be on a different game until we get to Sunday night. Then everyone's eyes will be on the game of the week. In my opinion, I'm sure Tyler will agree with me. George, I don't really know.
I would agree with you.
We got
Yes.
okay, we got the Tennessee Titans at the Green Bay Packers. Like I mentioned, the Packers need a Rams win and a win this week to clinch the number 1 seed. If the Seahawks win, this game doesn't mean too much for the Packers because it's out of conference, but it's a playoff team. It's going to be a good measuring stick. It's in Lambeau. It should be cold. Derrick Henry does scare me, but I'm going to go with Green Bay in this one. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, Cody, it is in Lambeau. But at the same time, I don't think that's that big of an impact. I mean, with 2020 and everything going on with COVID, there really hasn't been as much of a home field advantage for any team as we've seen in the past. And I think that this is the biggest game of the year for the Titans and the Packers, in my opinion. The Packers get to show what they can do, not only against one of the better teams in the AFC, but one of the biggest harps on them all year has been, can they stop the run? Now you're going against the best rusher in the league. At the same time, Tennessee, we have seen them in games against teams like the Bills, and they have dominated. We've seen them in games against teams like the Steelers, and they've fallen apart. So finally, we get to see the Titans against another playoff team and get to see if they really can handle them, especially with Derrick Henry rolling and defensive pieces finally coming back. I think it's going to be a close game, a very hard fought game, but I'm going to go with the Titans to win this one. Surprise, surprise.
So I guess I'm the wild card here. As if not shocking, you two both pick your team. Let me just say we've had a lot of good primetime games in the past where we had hoped that they would pan out to be an amazing game, and a lot of times they're a little bit underwhelming. I'm really hoping that this game, even though it looks like it could be, ends up being that 80 points on the board, shootout. You see back and forth, couple turnovers that turn into points, maybe all that excitement. It's always close. I don't know if it's going to be quite that much because, like I said, most of the time that ends up being not that exciting. I think in the end, I'm going to pick Tennessee because I feel like Green Bay might not have as much to play for. If you had to have me straight pick this game, like say both teams are fighting for a playoff spot or fighting for the number one seed, like guaranteed fighting for the number one seed, like we said, I pick Seattle. If Seattle wins, Green Bay doesn't really have much stock in this game. I don't know who I'd pick. I would literally be flipping a coin right now as I'm talking about this. But because I think Tennessee has more to play for, being right in a division race, I'm going to say Tennessee. And if you had to hold a gun to my head and make me say a reason, I'm going to say Derrick Henry in December against a bad run defense for Green Bay.
I mean, Derrick Henry in December is a good reason to pick the Titans on any given week. Um, but I think there's a whole nother aspect to this game that we haven't even discussed yet, and that is Matt LaFleur. He used to be the offensive coordinator for the Titans, and the year that he was our offensive coordinator was one of the worst offenses the Titans have had in recent years. And I'm talking about a team that went 2-14 and 3-13 in recent past. They had Matt LaFleur. They were awful. Green Bay's like, wow, that 28th ranked offense, that should be our offensive. That offensive coordinator should be our head coach. And they hired him, and boy, did they just made it work, and it's so frustrating. Him and Aaron Rodgers are really clicking now, and it's going to be interesting to see Matt LaFleur going against his former team with the Titans.
I like all these revenge games this week.
Absolutely, you can't go wrong with a good revenge game. Back to when LaFleur was a coordinator, that offseason, the made Dion Lewis a top 10 paid running back. And I still think, we saw them come around at the end of the season. I still think there was some upper management influence on making sure Dion Lewis got on the field because they gave him all that money when really they should have been handing Henry the ball. You mentioned LaFleur has been fantastic since he's came to Green Bay, one of the top records all time in his first two seasons. Guys, I looked at the weather, and currently it always changes, but currently there's a 40% chance of snow. Would love a Sunday night snow game in Lambeau. Wish I could be there instead of, I'm glad I get to watch it with you guys, but if I could be at a snow game in Lambeau, that would be amazing.
You want to
And
watch your defense
even though
try to tackle Derrick Henry in the snow? It's hard enough to do it in
hey,
good weather.
our run defense has gotten better I'm not saying it's great. Like, don't hear what I'm not saying. It's gotten better. We've seen our defense has been slowly getting better. If there's something to play for, I think the team will be juiced. It is a primetime game. And Derrick Henry, I think he's going to have a big game. I'll even make my bold prediction about Derrick Henry, even though I'm picking Green Bay. I think he's going to have 200 total yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, you're like, well, how can you pick Green Bay if he's going to have such a big game? Well, I'm going to take you back to earlier this season when Green Bay took on the Saints in New Orleans. Alvin Kamara had 197 total yards and 2 touchdowns, and the Packers won that game. So it is possible. I think they can do it again this week. I think if the snow might actually help the Packers, in a sense, Tannehill hasn't played in weather like that very often. It could slow his play action and his passing game down, and you can focus more on Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's still going to get his. There's no doubt about that. But I like Green Bay in this one.
So I was going to say this is a big Derrick Henry versus Devontae Adams. That could end up making it a Derrick Henry versus Aaron Jones, and Aaron Jones might have his chance in the spotlight to prove he is as good of a back as we all know he is.
Or, just maybe Derrick Henry versus rookie running back A.J. Dillon. That is 2 inches smaller, 1 pound heavier, and ran a .01 40 faster. So almost an identical clone to Derrick Henry. That would just be fun in the snow. 2 huge guys pounding it out. But I do think Aaron Jones will be the lead back. But Jamal is still not practicing with a quad injury. So A.J. Dillon could get some more opportunities in this week. Man, we could talk about this game We could talk about this for another hour. Like, this game,
Oh,
I'm
I'm
so
so
excited for.
excited. I mean, this game could honestly decide who wins the picks out of the Couch GMs, who's taking the punishment because we're picking differently. It could decide, uh, a big playoff implications for both teams. It could be on the line, so that's huge. And it could decide who wins out of our fantasy championship between the two of us. And, this game is just going to be exciting. I can't wait to see it. But you know what, Cody? I think I know what you were hinting at, and you are right. We should move on because not everybody listening is Titans or Packers fans. I don't know what's wrong with you, but they're not. So let's go ahead and move on to our final game, the Monday night game. We have the Buffalo Bills, who have clinched the division, going against the New England Patriots, the former division leaders. And this is the first time since 2008 that the Patriots have not won the division. Uh, and I don't think anything's going to change this game. I think Buffalo is going to dominate. The Patriots are missing Stephon Gilmore for this game as well. So I think Buffalo is going to feast. I'm excited to see it.
All right, Tyler, I'm going to take you back for a second.
Take me
Just to
back.
think back to when you were about 3 or 4 months old. I might have been about 6 months old. That was the last time the Bills won the AFC East.
Jeez.
Yeah,
I remember
that's
that
how
time
long it's been.
perfectly.
I figured you did. I did too.
It's a simpler time.
Anyway, so Bills Mafia, congratulations on finally getting that division title. I'm glad you finally got back in the playoffs last year. And I think that matchup on Sunday night might be a Super Bowl preview if it wasn't for the fact that I think Buffalo's got the Super Bowl berth at least this year. But that's just me.
Wow,
I'm
we're
going to go
talking
with
about Super
Buffalo in
Bowl
this game.
preview between Buffalo and Tennessee. You're just acting like the Chiefs don't exist, like they're not the best team in football right now.
You're right. The Chiefs are also definitely in there. I mean, I'm on the Buffalo bandwagon, but I think Tennessee could shock some people because I know a few weeks ago, I talked about the Rams being that team that no one talks about and the Bills being a team that no one talks about. I still think not a lot of people talk about Tennessee either, so who knows?
Well, George, let's get back on topic, about the Buffalo Bills at the New England Patriots. We're still weeks away from the Super Bowl. And we don't want to rush that because once the offseason hits, it's going to be a long time before we talk about football. Well, we're going to still talk about it every week with you guys, but the actual action will be a ways away. This game, the only thing that scares me is I don't have the exact numbers, but the team that's won the division the week before has had a dip in performance the week after. There's just been a little bit of extra high for winning the division. It takes them longer to get going. But good thing the Patriots aren't very good. Buffalo will hang around and then pull away at the end. I think it could be close to the first half. Buffalo fans might be going, "What is happening?" It's 14-14 at halftime, and then they end up winning 31-17. Like, that's the type of game I'm seeing for this. The one thing I will mention is I don't think he'll miss time. Stephon Diggs did leave with an injury. He came back to the sidelines. I think he even came back in for a few snaps. But with the division locked up, will be interesting to see if they do monitor his snaps at all because he is definitely a crucial part of this offense team going forward.
I agree, Cody. I think he is a huge piece of that offense, and I do see what you're saying about team clinching the division, and they kind of take a deep breath, or maybe take their foot off the gas a little bit because they already clinched the division. No need to push as hard as they have been. But I think this game is different. I mean, it's one thing that the Bills won the division for the first time since '95, but at the same time, like they have been pushed around by the Patriots for years. It has been just Patriots after Patriots after Patriots, and the Bills were never able to shine because of the dominance that was there. So I feel like they are not going to let up. I feel like they're actually going to press the gas a little bit harder, and I think they're going to play like absolute animals against the Patriots, especially with a huge corner in Stephon Gilmore missing the game. I think that the Bills are going to go nuts, and I am going to put my bold prediction on this game by saying the Bills will hang 50 or more points on the Patriots.
I'm gonna bleep it when someone edits this, but like, damn, that that's a lot of points, man. I hope you're right because Monday Night Football has been fun. Last week was a great game against two division rivals. Hopefully, this one is a great game for at least Buffalo Bills fans if you're correct. But 50 points could be what Josh Allen needs to get his name really in the MVP conversation.
I agree with you, Cody. I think the MVP conversation is honestly starting to get more up in the air every week. Patrick Mahomes kind of had a down week last week, and he was one of the favorites. And the Packers really didn't show the offensive output that we're used to from them last week. So Rodgers' value may have dipped a little bit in that MVP voting. And Josh Allen just threw his name right up in there by having a huge performance. And Derrick Henry. But I think that the MVP race is completely wide open. I'm excited to see who wins it. I mean, we're going to have to keep talking about it every week because right now there's no clear favorite, in my opinion, other than Derrick Henry.
Yeah. Well, I know Derrick Henry's your favorite. I do think Mahomes and Rodgers still have a slight lead over the rest of the bunch. I know you've complained about it in the past that it's too much of a quarterback award. It's tough because it's valuable and they touch the ball most, but how much of the Titans' success is related to Derrick Henry, that's a discussion for another day. And that's our game picks for Week 16. As always, they'll be posted on all our social medias, and get involved with them. Tell us who you think's going to win, who you think's going to lose. We'd love to hear it. Tell us why George is wrong, because that's what we want. We want George to lose the picks,
Absolutely.
or Tyler,
No,
just
George.
not me. I'm tired of doing. Yeah, we'll go all George. I'm just tired of doing punishments. But before we go, it is fantasy week. We have to help you guys out with a quick lightning round of start sit, and I'm just going to kick us off, go right into it. My starter for the week is Logan Thomas. I don't really care which quarterback between Alex Smith and Dwayne Haskins is out there. Logan Thomas has been balling out. He's becoming a clear favorite, possibly the number one target. I know McLaurin is still there, but actually getting thrown to, and he's still available in just under 50% of leagues. Guys, I don't care unless you have Kelsey, Waller, maybe Mark Andrews. Start Logan Thomas over anyone you have.
I'm going to pick up the next one, and I'm going to go with a receiver this time, and I'm going to go with Brandon Ayuk. I know that Nick Mullins is out, and Ayuk was one of Nick Mullins' favorite targets. I really don't care who starts at quarterback for San Francisco. I still think that Arizona will allow some points through the air, and any points that are going through the air, I think are going to go to Ayuk. He has been absolutely dynamic. He's been an exciting receiver to watch, and I think he is a must-start in your lineup this week.
I don't care who starts at quarterback for Baltimore. I'm kidding. It's Lamar. And I'm going to start J.K. Dobbins here. Don't think a lot of people have been looking at him, but he has put up 10 or more fantasy points in each of his last 5 games. He did miss one game in the middle there with COVID, but he has emerged as the lead back in Baltimore, and I think the thing that really makes me even more confident to play him now is we saw Mark Ingram, the veteran there, was a healthy scratch last week. They're actively trying to get more carries for Dobbins. Yes, you're going to see Gus Edwards sometimes. Don't freak out. Dobbins has been eating, and he will continue to this week.
And transitioning into the sits for this week, I got T.Y. Hilton. Now, 2 weeks ago, I told you to start him. If you did, he had a great game. He even had a great game last week. Now, I think against Pittsburgh, it's going to be tough to bench him, because if you're in your fantasy championship, or you're going to run the consolation bracket from 10th place because you started T.Y. Hilton, it's going to be tough to bench him. Well, you should sit him this week and pivot to a different option at wide receiver, or if he was your flex guy, look at a different running back. Against Pittsburgh, I think they get back on track like I mentioned, and T.Y. Hilton will have not such a good day. Not such a good day? Who says that? Not a very good day.
Well, speaking of things you're surprised that somebody would say, I'm going to go and say that my sit for this week is Russell Wilson. Now, don't throw anything at me. Don't yell at me. Just listen to me here. The Seahawks have been on a downswing lately. They have not been performing to the level that we saw earlier in the year when we were talking about Russell Wilson as a clear MVP favorite. They have fallen off since then. Russell Wilson's stats have fallen off since then. If you were able to make the fantasy championship despite having Russell Wilson only put up 12 points for you last week, then consider yourself lucky and start somebody else. Jalen Hurts, a Justin Herbert, whoever you have, start them over Russell Wilson.
And I'm going to go right along with Tyler there and say that you should also sit Tyler Lockett. This one came back to bite me last week, and really when you look at it, he hasn't been good in the last 4 or 5 games. It used to be a Lockett week or a DK week. Now it's kind of been a DK week or a no one week, it seems like. So I know it's tough. He was a top 10 receiver most of the season. He's probably one of your top guys. But you almost might be able to go out there and find somebody on the waiver wire or somebody on your bench, definitely, that has been more consistent, putting up more points than Tyler Lockett. So if you can, sit him this week.
Alrighty, that's this week's sit start. As George mentioned, it did bite him last week. I did take him down. It's probably going to irritate him that I mentioned this, but I was praying that he didn't switch in Ayuk for Tyler Lockett. I figured that was my only way to win the game. It worked. So like George, I agree with George, sit Tyler Lockett. He hasn't been very good outside of 2 games this season. And guys, that wraps up our show. Thanks as always for sticking through listening. Please follow us on social media at the Couch GMs. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting app, please hit like, subscribe, leave us a review, a 5-star review. If it's a good one, maybe we'll even read it on the show. And good luck in your fantasy playoffs this week.
And guys, not only can you follow us on social media, but you can get involved with us too. And you know what? It's a lot more fun if you do. If you think that you are picking games better than we do, if you think that we are crazy with our picks, especially George, then let us know what your picks are. Get involved. Talk some trash with us, honestly. Instead of yelling at your TV, yell at us. Let's have some fun with this podcast. Let's make it more fun for us, make it more fun for you, and get involved.
And most importantly, enjoy your holiday this week. Merry Christmas, happy holidays to everybody. You've been tuned into the Couch GMs podcast. For Tyler Snyder and Cody Roadcap, I'm George Kerth, and we will see you all next week.
Boom.